Hey, folks, this clip is brought to you by Farm Bureau Health Plans. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ. That is Farm Bureau Health Plans. Now, preview and prediction here for the Florida game. So we saw Florida lose to Utah. Then Utah went and struggled mightily against a Baylor team that got smacked by Texas State. And ultimately, they did win. Utah did win that game. Utah is decent, but Utah was playing in that game down 8 starters plus their star quarterback, Cam Rising. He wasn't playing in that game either. So they were facing like a third string quarterback. And they didn't just lose to Utah, they kind of got their butt kicked. And on top of that, Mertz doesn't look like the dude. Their quarterback transfer from Wisconsin. It's just not there. And I'm not sure they really have a suitable backup. Their suitable backup is playing at Arizona State right now, Jaden Rashada. And so, I mean, I don't think they're incredible. Defensive line didn't look like it's a world beater. Defensive backs didn't look like world beaters. I mean, they got beat by a third string quarterback. And the offensive line, kind of neither here nor there, but it's Florida. And you can't ever discount that element. And it's what I hate the most. And I already feel like throwing up talking about the Florida game. What say you, Zach? What are you thinking about this one?
Yeah, the minute the Austin Peay game was over, I'm the same way. I'm always like, man, the Florida-Tennessee game is one of the most fun things in college football, but my nerves the week of the game are always terrible, and this week is even worse because you have to go win this game. Like you have to find a way to win this game. So that the pressure is certainly there, but the good news is Florida feels the same way. It's going to be I'm worried about the pressure that Florida might be able to generate. Billy Napier's, that's like probably the part of his defense that he's happiest with is their ability to rush the passer, which seems like Florida always finds a way to have some athletes out there that can get after the quarterback. Concerned about that. The running game, obviously, Tennessee's been decent against the run over the last couple of years. This will be the defense's first real test to kind of show what they have and if they can stop some elite players. And Florida's, I want to put them in the elite running game category, but it's good enough that it could give Tennessee some issues. I don't think Graham Mertz is going to beat you, but he can play well enough that if you don't go out and execute on offense, he can play well enough to win the game for Florida. But I don't think he's going to go out there and, throwing the ball all over you like Spencer Rattler did with South Carolina last season. Not a huge scrambler. He does have the capability of getting into the end zone and picking up 10 or 15 yards with his legs if he has to. But it's not something that he's going to look to do. I think he has like minus something career rushing yards. But he does have, like, if you look at his stats, he's got like a long of like 15 or 20 every season. And I would bet on that happening Saturday night at some point when it's 3rd and 16. This dude's going to run in slow motion for 17 yards, and we're all going to be throwing everything across our living room saying, of course, we knew this would happen. This guy has no speed, and here he goes. So we'll watch out for at least one of those. But really, I think it comes down to, can the offensive line protect? Can they not have the pre-snap penalties that we saw in Athens last season? If they do, it's going to make it really hard for this offense to get anything going. They can't start out behind the chains. They can't be in 1st and 15, 2nd and 15 because of dumb false starts or other procedural penalties. So they have to play pretty clean and handle the noise well, and they have to protect Joe Milton. If they can do that, I think they'll be able to run the ball, and we'll see where the offense goes from there. If they're able to open it up and win some of these matchups, it'll be interesting to see if does Florida try to take away the deep stuff like Austin Peay did. Was Austin Peay really taking it away? I mean, we don't really get to see a good angle of that on television. You don't get the overhead kind of all 22 view to know if Tennessee had guys open running down the field. I know against Virginia they did at times. They didn't hit it. Joey Hosley said that during his media session last week. I'm not sure if he speaks tomorrow. We might know a little bit more about that. But, does Florida try to take that away? How does Tennessee counter that? Is it the run game? Is it more of these perimeter screens? Are they athletic enough to beat Florida on the perimeter and on the edge? And I think those are really the keys to the game.
Tons of good points. Elias says it's Florida built. I assume that's like Florida and Vanderbilt together. I will say to start my assessment, I mean, this is the worst Florida will ever be. I think. Like you're year in and year out, unless they end up firing Napier and they hire an even bigger clown. I mean, I don't think it's going to get better than this opportunity and maybe next year. And so you got to start there and be completely honest with yourself. And that's how important this game is, because there's a little bit of, if not now, when? After Tennessee becomes like really elite, there's no guarantee of that happening. You have some really good recruits coming in, no doubt. And obviously Nico in the wings, but it's not going to get easier. And there's this element too. Austin, great comment here. He says, it'll be interesting to see if Napier throws all caution to the wind this year like he did last year. His play calling was desperate last year. That's 100% true. He went all out in that game, recovered an onside kick. Yeah, I mean, we all watched it. That wasn't a desperate call. It made a bunch of sense in that moment because time was running out on them. But
a lot of his early fourth down attempts instead of kicking field goals.
Yes, yeah,
and maybe a lot of that. Maybe that game's closer if he kicks those field goals too.
maybe. But there was definitely an element there. I think that's spot on from Austin. And does that happen where Napier's like, I'm coaching for my job, coaching for my life right now, and he just comes out absolutely swinging, catches Tennessee off guard like Austin P did, and it's just a completely off disaster day. I don't know, because what I think has to happen is that you come out strong on offense. If that doesn't happen, I'm having doom thoughts in the first quarter, because that's how you just smacked LSU right in the mouth in Baton Rouge last year. You think about the games on the road where Tennessee has done the best. At Missouri, they come out and you just get a 21-point lead right off the jump, and you just start running it up. You get in that comfortable position. You're in the catbird seat then, and all you kind of have to do at that point is, like last year at LSU, they did such a great job of just like running the ball, running the clock, and especially now with the running clock for first downs is even easier. That has to happen. Has to. Because if you get into a position where Milton is having to throw a bunch in the middle of the field, way downfield, because you're down and you're trying to score, that's a recipe for disaster, in my opinion. That's a recipe for disaster for almost anybody, because downfield long throws are just lower percentage, lower percentage play. And you don't have the luxury of running the ball all the time like Josh Heupel wants to. And that just can't happen. You have to come out 14-point lead in that first quarter. It just is like, it's just a requirement, at least a 7-point lead. I think you got to get there and then go from there. The game from that point can go a lot of different ways, for sure. But I think that puts you in the best position possible. I think obviously it would give Joe a ton of confidence, and you're feeling really good. And it's what happened with Joe in the Clemson game. You got a nice lead in that one. I think you got a 14-point lead in like the second quarter. And then from there, you just worked it down, and you can kind of in that second half run out the clock, so to speak. And I think best case scenario, that's how this goes for Tennessee, because if they're coming from behind, coming from behind by more than 3 to 6 points, you're in a tough spot, and that just cannot happen. Do I think that's what is more likely here? I think Tennessee jumping out to a nice lead is more likely, because a lot of people have been saying it in these comments. Where was one? Yeah, Fallout Zone says it here. He said, all I know is that the defensive line will eat if Florida's offensive line looks like it did against Utah. Yeah. If you're getting to Mertz, you're in his face, you're making him feel uncomfortable that entire time, I think Florida will have a really hard time scoring the football.
And he's going to turn the ball over. If you can get to him, you don't have to hit him. You can force him to make some bad decisions. But I mean, you got to get home there.
Exactly. And another good point for Falls on here. Florida doesn't have Anthony Richardson to bail them out. UT's defense is better than it was last year. And Jasmine is thinking what I'm thinking here. She says, I say throw a few deep early. Yes. Go for it. Like the comment that said earlier, I wonder if Napier will be desperate. I hope Heupel is desperate. I hope Heupel comes in going, this game, as of this moment, this game defines this season. The next game will define the season after this one, after you win this one. But as of right now, this Florida game defines this season. And it's so huge, so historically huge for Tennessee if you could win this one. And so just go for it, baby. Just balls to the wall. Leave it all out there. Is what I would like to see, and hopefully it's not what we were talking about earlier. Some of the theories, like he doesn't trust Milton, doesn't trust the offensive line, doesn't trust the receivers. Hopefully that's not true, and they do just throw open the playbook and kick in the door. Farm Bureau Health Plans has been serving Tennesseans for over 75 years, and much has changed in Tennessee over the years, but some has stayed the same. Farm Bureau Health Plans has always valued personal relationships, especially when it comes to good health and good service. Plan on Farm Bureau Health Plans for health, dental, and vision. For better coverage, better rates, and better service, go to fbhp.com/ATOZ or walk into one of their 200-plus locations across the state of Tennessee. That is fbhp.com/ATOZ, Farm Bureau Health Plans. But get up and have the defense eat before the defense gets early, or before I read early in the comments, before the defense gets tired later in the game. Jump on them early and bury them. And that's the way that you win this game, because it can be like last year. You buried them and then they came back, but you still won because you buried them. And that's the ideal scenario for this game.
Yeah, I'm interested in the first series too. I mean, obviously the whole game, and I'm really interested in seeing this conversation. How do they start the game? I would bet on a running play just to kind of see what they can get going with Jalen Wright and hope that you pick up a big chunk. We've had this big debate about how much was Heupel showing, how much of that was by design, how much of it was the flow of the game and trying to just get out of there with a win, regardless of why Tennessee played the way they did against Virginia and Austin Peay. That is still the film that Billy Napier has of this team. Now, I'm sure they're watching Vanderbilt and they're watching Clemson from last season, any of Milton's reps in garbage time. But as far as what this team's done with this personnel, that's what he has to look at. So it is helpful in that sense that there isn't a lot on film from this season for Florida to look at. They don't really know how Tennessee would attack some of those like 3 high safety looks and some of those soft shell coverages. They don't really know how Joe Milton and Joey Hosley, as the offensive coordinator, how this version of Tennessee will handle those moments. So that, maybe is a little advantage, at least for the first part of the game. So if you throw some of those perimeter screens out there, Florida's probably ready for that. They've seen that a ton, in the Austin Peay and the Virginia game already. So maybe you disguise a look. I don't know what makes sense there, but I would definitely try to take a shot deep pretty early in the game, because if you hit it, suddenly Joe Milton's feeling himself a little bit. Everybody on the sidelines into it. All the wide receivers are starting to feel a little bit better. Takes a little bit of the pressure off. The downside is if you miss it, you still some frustration there, but I think it's worth it. I mean, like you said, you got to jump out to a decent lead here if you want to put this game away early, because the crowd's going to stay into it no matter how hard you try to take them out of it, unless you're just up by 35 at halftime, and that would be great. But it's going to be a fight probably for 60 minutes. So you got to go score early and often. And like you said, you definitely don't want to be in catch-up mode, because we haven't seen Milton have to operate in that yet, and we don't know how that would really go for him. Not saying it would go bad. We just don't know. And I really don't want to find out in Gainesville.
Elias asked, what's the best case scenario? And that can kind of lead us into our prediction here. I mean, to me, the best case scenario is you just blow their doors off. I think that's completely possible. And Elias says it in the lower comment just below it. Variance is massive in this game. You could see 31-3 at halftime with 150 plus rushing yards, or 10-7 Florida's up, and we're all freaking out. I think both of those are feasible and possible. And yeah, I mean, your best case scenario is you do jump on them early, you take the crowd out of it, and you just run it up. And there's a scenario in this game where Tennessee wins like 41-14. That's totally real. There's also a scenario where they get, down in the mud and you lose like 28-24. I think that's also feasible. So And that's tough to say after how amazing this offense was last year, but I just think that the floor here for the Milton-led offense is just lower. So I'll go first with the prediction. I usually throw it to you, Zach, but I'll go first on this one. Everybody knows that my yearly prediction is that Tennessee loses to Florida until they don't. Now, in my preseason prediction, I said that Tennessee would walk into the swamp and lay the smackdown on Florida. And I had changed my ways, and Heupel had made me a believer. I'm a sheep now. But, I just I'm a new man. Am I still a new man now that you had kind of this debacle against Austin Peay? Yes, I am. I still am a believer because I just think it's kind of the point that I said earlier. It's a very real possibility that Joe Milton is mediocre in this game and Tennessee still wins. You look back historically in this matchup, like that one that ended on the Hail Mary. That Tennessee team was atrocious. Yeah. 2017.
Yeah.
That Tennessee team was not good, and they were poorly coached, and they almost won in the swamp. You had them nailed down in the swamp with Butch in 2015. They blew that. You've had teams that I think aren't as talented as this one almost beat Florida. And I just now trust implicitly in Heupel. Now, do I think that it's going to be the blowout that I thought before the season? I have changed that. I don't think it's going to be the blowout that I thought. But I do think that Tennessee just squeaks one out here in the swamp. First time in 20 years. It just feels like the right time. It's kind of that same, if not now, when? Because it's not going to get any easier probably ever with just the level of quarterback that they have. Their offensive line play hasn't been great. I do think I want to say they get an offensive lineman back that's been injured, and he's a key piece. So maybe that is a factor. I'm not sure.
Their center as well. So I think both centers possibly coming back for this game.
But there's still, I mean, your strength's on the edge. I think you should still be able to get in Mertz's face and be, live in that backfield all day. And so I'll say Tennessee does jump out maybe like 14-7 early. Maybe it becomes like 28-14 in the third quarter. Florida maybe comes back like 28-24. We're all sweating. Oh my gosh, the torture's never going to end. And then you finish it off. I'll say 31-24 Tennessee. You seal it up. Kick a field goal to get to 31, but you didn't even need it because Florida wasn't going to score another touchdown anyway. So that's what I'll say. And that would be Tennessee covering, I believe. They're a 7-point favorite, I think, last thing I saw. So where are you at, Zach?
Yeah, I'm pretty close to you. I'd already written my score out there and typed it out. I kind of feel it going this. I don't think Florida can score enough to beat Tennessee, even if Tennessee isn't as crisp as they were against, like Alabama or somebody like that last season. I think Joe Milton will be better. I think the whole team will be better. I think that was a real wake-up call against Austin Peay. I don't think that game is because Tennessee's bad. I think it raised the questions that we spoke about throughout this whole live stream, and I think those are valid questions. Ultimately, I think it was a big combination of Austin Peay's game plan. It was very unique. It was very effective. They had high energy. Like you said, you got to respect the way they came out there and competed. They made life really difficult for Tennessee. Also, I think this Tennessee team was looking past this Austin Peay game a little bit, and that's not in a disrespectful way. I don't think that they were like, oh, we're just going to beat these guys and they stand no chance. I think they prepared the right way. I think they took the game serious, but I think this is something we saw with Georgia last year at times, right? They didn't play well against Missouri. They only won by 4 points on the road. Now, obviously, Missouri is a much better opponent than Austin Peay. I'm not really comparing it in that sense, but they had some, like, Georgia should beat Missouri by more than 4 points. Georgia's way better than Missouri. They could beat Missouri in Athens when they're clicking by 60 points, right? I mean, and the same thing with Kent State. They beat Kent State by 17 points last season. They gave up 22 points to Kent State. That really good Georgia defense. Like, sometimes teams that have high aspirations, it's tough to get up for some of these pay games where it's just not the same energy. It's not the same vibe. So I think all of that really kind of contributed to what we saw on Saturday night. I think they'll be a lot better after that players only meeting. But I do think it's still the Swamp. Those players are going to be up for it. Billy Napier's been talking to them all week about the importance of this game and what it means historically and what it means for them as a program. So they're going to be ready to go, but I think Tennessee will come out. I think they'll win. I think they'll cover, but not by a lot. I have Tennessee winning 33-24. So same amount of points as you for Florida.
There you go. We both say Tennessee win. What a time to be alive. Did you ever think we'd get here, Zach, where we both choose Tennessee to beat Florida in the Swamp? I mean, even if Tennessee ends up losing, what a time to be alive.
Yeah. Let's hope we don't have to recap that.
Some of the predictions.
And honestly, I dread it if they do lose, because I know the whole tone of the conversation will suddenly flip over. Not for everybody, but there will be a lot of people like questioning Heupel and questioning all this stuff. And it's like, it's nonsense. You've seen where we've been. You'll know if that day ever comes. And, eventually it will in some form or fashion, either whatever happens, retirement, another job, poor performance. It happens to every program. But look at what Florida's done in the Swamp the last 50 years. They've hardly won there. Peyton Manning, couldn't win there. How much can we hold that against Heupel if this doesn't happen? Not very much, in my opinion. Not in this game.
Yeah, it won't be an ugly conversation per se, but it's one that let's go in there and win. Let's just do it.